Well, the White House is looking into a woman who posed as a reporter. The woman who was introduced as Maria Fernanda from Univision asked Vice President Kamala Harris a question at a recent press conference. Let's take a look at that.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. For me, it's an honor because I actually got to vote for the first time as a nationalized citizen, and I voted for you. So my question is, what would you say to these women, those mothers, and also women of color on both sides of the border, farmers, many of them who I see every day, as a message of hope, but also as what will you do for them in the next coming years?
You know, unusually transparent for a member of the press corps.
No, that's what I thought when I saw it. Like, well, what makes this woman so different from every other reporter, except she actually announces that she voted for her. But she seemed almost restrained compared to other reporters that we see, especially at MSNBC. But you know what's interesting is that it's not actually that totally fair. She didn't really do anything. Her name, she has the same name as a Univision reporter, but she was there because Kamala Harris had a meeting with them with some entrepreneurs right before this. So that's why she was in the building. And you don't see the response that Kamala Harris gives, but it's ridiculously, I mean, it's like so. She talks about how the problem for women in Mexico and Central America is lack of access to capital, which I don't think if you speak to people there that's like the primary issue is, like individual bank loans. Not to say that that's not important, but it's more systemic.
This is such like 90s, 2000s era like microloans. You're like this whole thing was exposed as a scam, and Kamala is apparently not even paying attention. But it doesn't. Yeah.
Vice President for the World Bank, Kamala Harris.
Payday lenders, yeah,
pay lenders, right? I guess it's better than like arresting moms for truancy and stuff. But so that's what happened was like. This woman really didn't do anything wrong. She has that name. She was there for a meeting. She asked a question. The one thing she didn't do is she didn't say when they said from Univision, Maria Fernandez, she didn't say, oh, no, I'm not from Univision. But she did right afterwards. And she was like swept up in the moment. And I kind of, Maria Fernandez, sorry. And what really happened is that it was on the Biden administration, their comms people didn't clarify it afterwards, and I get why. It's kind of embarrassing to say, whoops, we let in an entrepreneur who had just had a meeting with Kamala Harris, not a reporter, ask a question. So.
But as you said earlier, the transparency was actually kind of refreshing, you know, as opposed to having a journalist who is terrified to disclose that they voted for Kamala Harris, as 90% of them probably did. This woman just comes out and says it.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is that, you know, she actually asked an interesting question. I mean, the question was a good one, and it was more, the answer was terrible because unless you're literally like banker, microlender representative, and that in which case the answer was amazing. But it was an interesting, what was so weird about it is that it was a question from someone who had actually sounded like they had some experience in that area. And this woman who asked the question does indeed work with women and farmers on the border, which makes sense. Of course, Kamala Harris, as we know, has not been to the border, although as she responded to Lester Holt, we have been to the border. She hasn't been.
She hasn't been to Europe either, though, Katie. So
that's what I was going to say. She hasn't been to Europe. So, in all fairness, that's totally. And she didn't seem to understand what he was asking her about. I mean, that was an interesting. I think she has some issues that we need to tend to. You know, we always talk about Biden's cognitive decline, but I'm a little worried about Kamala right now.
Well, I wonder what we have been to the border.
Royal we.
Right, the royal we. I'm going to start using that for anything that I haven't done. I was like, well, we actually have.
We have, as a country, we have.
We have.
Kind of a beat poetry type of thing going like to it. You know, we have. You have.
We, in fact, were on time for this Zoom call and were paying attention the entire time.
Yeah.
I wasn't necessarily on time for it, nor was I paying attention to any of it, but we were. We were.
Yeah. She sounds like Ivanka Trump, too. Like, that's the funny thing about all of this. It, like, gets into the sort of, like, the corporatism between, like, Ivanka and Kamala. If you drill down to it, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's Slate, yes, like Slate Queen in finance.
Microloans.
Right.
Women need microloans.
Yes, that ideology springs from that same social class, for sure.
And I was so happy, though, I have to say, I was really relieved she didn't talk about root causes, because that's something she loves talking about when she talks about Latin America, Central America in particular, the triangle. She loves to talk about root causes, and what's interesting is she never actually talks about root causes. She talks about
right. Go ahead.
Right, she talks about the root causes, and then it's like corruption. They don't have good adaptation for climate change. It's like, you're the vice president of America and you want to get to the root causes of what's happening in Central America. You're probably going to have to look at what the government of which you're head is doing and has done.
Those are not root causes. Those are root symptoms. So
exactly.
you're getting closer. But you got to go one layer back. Where did that corruption come from?
Exactly.
Where did that climate collapse come from? Then you might actually be talking about root causes and not root symptoms. But yeah, so
it's funny. It's like, the other that terrible root cause of having a democratically elected leader be cooed. That root cause. No, the root cause is the United States, for instance, supporting a coup there.
Let's take a look at some of that cooing. Here's MSNBC's Nicolle Wallace passionately commenting on the remarks Joe Biden gave to the American troops in England this past week.
President Biden there marking the start of his first foreign trip with a heartfelt and at times soaring speech to Air Force personnel stationed in the UK. It is the very first event in a week of meetings with Western leaders and NATO allies. All of that before a high-profile summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. This trip was always going to be one of the big milestones of the new Biden presidency, the first trip abroad by the president who comes after the president who saw zero value in our friends and allies and delighted in pandering to the world's most heinous dictators. Also, it's just impossible to miss the sincerity and the connection between this president and first lady and our troops.
It's amazing. I swear to God. Honestly, if I can help it, I never miss Nicolle Wallace's show because it is so damn hilarious.
I know. It's like you should play drinking games to it or something. Every time she says something, like every time it's like her or like, I don't know, North Korea news coverage of Kim Jong-un. Like it's so overtly praising. I mean, it's like it's embarrassing. Like the funny thing is that she's way worse than the other reporter. Well, the other non-reporter.
Right.
Like she's, she makes the woman who openly voted for Kamala Harris look totally restrained.
But don't you feel like she's trying to make a point that like she's one of the good Republicans, capital G, capital R, and so she's like she's just like really dumb about the way she's signaling it. Like they won't know that I'm just being shifty and that I was, they'll forget about the Bush White House, all of that. I'm atoning for my sins. Yeah,
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it is funny. And, this is a shorter version of it, right? Because we don't have all day to hear her praising him and fawning. But like in I think the full-length video, there's like a hostage video feel to it because she keeps saying President Biden. Like she doesn't use he. She keeps using President Biden. It has a very weird, like, okay, it's the cry for help. We get it. And it's just like, I mean, I don't know if like do they see her scripts? Does anyone look at them and be like, you got to tone it down a little, like, Nicolle, you got to dial it down. But maybe you're saying she does have like, MSNBC has a very robust, as you know, like Bush White House to MSNBC pipeline in place. But maybe she feels like, she needs to constantly. So I don't get why she would feel nervous. She's in good company, right? She's like her and a bunch of neocons have that's kind of like the MSNBC 2.0 that we've seen since Trump. But the constant, it's so over the top, as you were saying. And, Biden's president, Trump isn't president. I don't get why you have to constantly, I get it. There are differences. He was unprecedented in many ways. Trump was, although I like to, in many ways, those were more aesthetic than anything else. But I don't know I don't get why she's in that mode.
Right. And people forget that she was the chief spokesperson for a warmonger who was so extreme that they gave the next president a Nobel Peace Prize just for beating him in the election.
Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Yes. This guy was such a hawk and such a neocon and such a regime changer. And, no one likes to talk about this, but like he has more blood on his hands than Trump does. I mean, when it comes to like war, at least, COVID makes it more complicated, obviously. But like, this guy is hearing this woman have any kind of microphone to talk about foreign policy of all things is really shameful. Because again, she was WMDs. She was let's destroy Iraq. Let's destroy that entire region. And yeah, it is a reminder. I mean, that, you just pointed out to me in this little back and forth. This is why, of course, she has to keep talking about Trump, because she has to talk about how bad she was. Then she doesn't have to deal with the really bad guy she actually worked for and whose policy she put into place.
Yeah, but even when they do talk about the guy that she worked for, which comes up on MSNBC, by the way, all the time, you'll hear them sort of like speaking reverently about the past. Nicolle Wallace doesn't believe anything except for the norms that have the capital N norms, of course, that create the system that makes rich people rich, because they think that's when the country, and powerful, they think that's when the country and the moral order is calm and everything is good. That's what they believe in at the end of the day, is the establishment.
Right, and she's not serious anyway. She claimed that she brought democracy to Iraq, but yet Israel somehow still remains the only democracy in the Middle East. What happened there?
Point.
I thought we got a democracy out of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, Katie Halper, thank you so much. Katie Halper, thanks so much for joining us. And we'll have more Rising right after this.